A few days ago, I posted a graph to Tumblr depicting the rough likelihood of various countries existing in the Ace Attorney universe based on available evidence. After several justified minor corrections, and also several people pointing out even more slight evidence that I hadn't even considered, I present to you a full iceberg breaking down which countries exist in Ace Attorney. Relatively minor spoilers for pretty much the whole franchise. For the sake of clarity, this video will cover the English localization of the games, because the Japanese version differs slightly. I don't speak Japanese, so I can't verify firsthand, but for example, when characters leave for Europe in the English localization, they leave for the USA in the Japanese version. Speaking of the USA, this brings us to our first country. God bless America, the USA definitely exists. This is where the games take place, albeit in a version of Los Angeles that is extremely influenced by Japanese culture according to the developers, to explain why it looks like that. On the same subject, Japan definitely exists, because this is where the protagonists of the Great Ace Attorney mostly originate from, and where several of its cases take place, regardless of localization. Germany also definitely exists. This is where the Von Karmas are from, and where Miles Edgeworth spends many years of his childhood. Also, Clavier is implied to be a Europhile with a fascination of the German language, and his name means piano in German. The UK also definitely exists, because this is where the Great Ace Attorney takes place. From this we can assume the existence of England, Scotland, Wales, and probably also Northern Ireland. We can't be completely sure that it still exists in the modern era, aside from a handful of offhand mentions like Mimi Minnie's car being British, but we can be pretty certain. We can be reasonably sure that France exists, since at least one character is explicitly a French chef, Jean Armstrong from Très Bien, and Paris is mentioned more than once. For example, Cindy Stone went there before her murder. Also in names like Betty and Bonnie de Femme, and even the name Shelley de Killer implies the French language. We can be pretty sure Russia exists, since Phoenix spends a lot of time during the 7-year gap playing poker in a Russian restaurant, and there are also multiple characters in Great Ace Attorney with implicitly or explicitly Russian names and origins. There is an Italian restaurant in one of the games, and the phrase Italian heritage is used, and multiple characters have Italian names throughout the games, so we can assume Italy exists. Zimbabwe is mentioned in connection with the Very Big Circus touring, so we can assume that it exists in the game's current day. We can be sure Afghanistan existed, at least during the time of the Great Ace Attorney, since the character John Garadeb fought in an unspecified war there. It's unclear whether it still exists, but we can assume so in the absence of contrary evidence. China is mentioned as the origin of the folktale upon which the design of the King of Prosecutors trophy is based. It's also mentioned several times in Great Ace Attorney in the context of geopolitics. We can't be completely certain that it still or currently exists, but we can assume so in the absence of evidence otherwise. Magnus MacGilded from Great Ace Attorney is an Irishman. No mention is made of Ireland in chronologically later games as far as I remember, but we can assume it still exists. The wooden bear figurine that Adrian Andrews acquires is from Switzerland. Mo the Circus Clown mentions Mexican food, and a tiny, tiny Mexican flag appears in Valant Grimari's Shocked sprite. Fun fact, the Dahlia is also native to Mexico and Central America. The character Bruce Fairplay from Great Ace Attorney uses a lot of Australian slang terms, and an Australian flag is also visible on the beach when Larry decorates it. Denmark appears once on a newspaper in Great Ace Attorney, and is also visible on Valant Grimari's Shocked sprite. Multiple characters, including Red White, the Judge, and Athena, speak Spanish, profess to speak Spanish, or at least use Spanish words, although it's unclear whether Spain itself actually exists. The name corrida from Juan Corrida also derives from a term for bullfighting, although according to the trivia section of the wiki, this carries a sexual connotation in Spanish slang. Nice. The Judge, not the regular judge, the other one, you know the one, uses Canadian slang terms and speech quirks, implying that Canada exists. According to Tumblr, Maya mentions Canada by name at least once, which I don't remember, but I'll take their word for it. The flags of Brazil, South Korea, and Bangladesh are all visible on the public beach after Larry decorates it. The flag of Belgium is also visible in the non-remastered version of the game. Luxembourg might exist if the flag in Larry's beach decorations is assumed to be upside down. Likewise, the Republic of the Congo, not to be confused with the Democratic Republic of the Congo, might exist if the flag in Valant Grimari's Shocked animation is assumed to be upside down. Most tenuously of all, this flag at the public beach looks like a miscoloured Indian flag, but it's possible that those last 3 were meant to be fictional countries, or they just didn't think about it too hard. Greece is implied to have existed at least in its ancient form via the origin of the names Athena and Apollo, as well as Aristotle, Themis, Metis, and Aura. It's not, to my knowledge, ever mentioned otherwise, so it may not exist in its modern form in the modern era. As Tumblr user Euporias points out, the name Van Zieks implies the existence of the Netherlands, or at least the Dutch language from which the preposition van originates. The Eudicula minor, or blue penguin, is only found in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Rifle is one of these. This implies that the landmass exists, although we have no proof at time of writing that Aotearoa, New Zealand exists as we know it. If we want to be boring and make all of this analysis useless, Interpol exists. And in real life, Interpol has 196 member countries, which is almost every country and state on Earth. So we could take that as evidence that the countries in the Ace Attorney universe are basically the same as we know them. However, I don't think that the existence of Interpol necessitates the existence of all of those countries, so I'm choosing to largely ignore it. As a bit of a bonus, Bohemia is mentioned as an independent country in the Great Ace Attorney, which is historically accurate, but it's never mentioned in any of the chronologically later games, so we can assume that just like in real life, it's now part of what is in the modern day the Czech Republic or Czechia. But if it brings you joy, you could probably reasonably assume that Bohemia still exists in the Ace Attorney universe. There's no evidence either way. And as a further bonus, many small things, like the use of Latin a few times throughout the games, and the names Rex and Jove, etc., point to the former existence of Rome, although we can assume that just like in real life, it was eventually succeeded by the Byzantine Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and modern Italy. So, as a generous estimate, there are 27 countries proven to exist in the Ace Attorney universe, or up to 196 if you take the existence of Interpol as proof of the existence of all of its member countries. There are also a small handful of fictional countries which the developers presumably invented to avoid depicting any real-world political conflicts. The most solidly depicted of these is Curine, where a lot of Spirit of Justice takes place and from which many of its characters originate. Then there's also Borginia, which is mentioned a couple of times in various Ace Attorney games, and as a fun fact, was originally from Capcom's Dino Crisis game, which slightly suggests that Dino Crisis takes place in the same universe as Ace Attorney. There is the country Zhongfa, which is a small Asian country mentioned in several of the Investigations game, and from which the character Xilong Lang originates. Then there used to also be Alabast and Babal, which after a political conflict was resolved, re-merged into the country of Codopia. And finally, there is a small North American country called the Goldstruck Republic, which is only mentioned in one case in the Ace Attorney anime and nothing else. There are no flags depicted for Borginia, the Goldstruck Republic, or more egregiously, Curine. For the sake of visual aid, I've taken the liberty of assigning this fictional flag from the beach decoration to Borginia, and designing my own for the other two. And with that, I present The World According to Ace Attorney. If you noticed any mistakes I've made, or if you think there's evidence for other countries in the games that I didn't notice, then feel free to put it in the comments. Cheers for watching.